a bank. Imagine you're watching this through your binoculars. Imagine your freezing fingertips fumbling to focus. Feel the warmth in your heart that comes from the love of wildlife. Yes! Welcome to WinterWatch. As will be clear to fans of classical music, I haven't a clue what I'm doing, but welcome to WinterWatch 2021. Very sadly, it's our final programme. Massive thanks, though, to Steve Pycroft and the Kaleidoscope Orchestra for their magical mash-up of our theme tune. Top work. Now, for the last couple of weeks, we've been trying to bring you the very best of British wildlife from out here in the wild and wet winter through your windows to put a smile on your face. And our mission remains the same this evening, and we've got a cracking programme for you. Got some great new science, actually. Did you know that in your lifetime, if you're around, well, 50 or 60 like me, foxes' heads have actually changed shape? We've also got a furious debate about the shape of a spoonbill's bill and why it's shaped in that particular fashion, all coming up a bit later. But firstly, you have been out and about in the winter countryside too, and you've seen some pretty spectacular things. You and Miles on Mull has. Oh, you and we are so envious of you. Look at this, the Aurora Borealis. And look, watch this bit. Oh, my goodness me. Oh, I'd love to have been there. I'd love to have been there. But you don't have to go to far-flung parts of the UK to engage with wildlife. You can do that in your back garden, just as Caroline Hamilton did. Look at this. Two foxes, and I'm going to use the P word, playing in the snow. Bit of a hide and seek. They're loving it, aren't they? Look at this, jumps over and then just rolls in the snow. Maybe they've never seen snow before. I took my poodles out the other day. We had a bit of snow here. They'd never seen it before. And they were doing exactly the same thing. And I would say that they were playing. And if a poodle can play, then I've got to say, a fox can play too. Excellent stuff. And we do love it when you get out and about and send us those little cameos of wildlife, because they all give us such a lift. Gillian is down in Cornwall, of course. Gillian, that was fantastic, wasn't it? But I know that you've been looking through all of the material that people have been sending in too.
Absolutely, yes, we are going to be doing that as well. But we have had, I have to say, the most amazing 2 weeks over here, following the beaver family down in Cornwall Beaver Project. And we've been doing it using the warmth, using a thermal imaging camera to follow the activity into the dark. And we've had amazing views, but of this particular adult. Now, what I want you to remember is this is happening in the pitch black. Now, beavers have pretty poor night vision, but they use their smell and their hearing, as you can see this one doing, to find their way through the dark. Now, if you look really carefully, what you'll see is the eyes and the ears are glowing white there, and that's because that's where most of the heat is radiating from the body. The whole body's covered in insulating fur. And just like that, you can see their lodge is also radiating heat out of that top. Isn't that amazing? That is so cozy and warm in there. That's where they retreat to dry off, groom, and warm up. Now, we have had our fair share of weather, I think it's safe to say, over the last 2 weeks. But I think Iolo Williams in mid-Wales may have had the worst of it. And I am sure, Iolo, you would love to have a warm beaver lodge to retreat to on a night like tonight.
Do you know what, Gillian? Over the past 2 weeks, I would have given anything to have been curled up in a warm beaver lodge. But I'm pleased to say the rain has finally stopped. It really is dry here tonight. Now, when I go out and about and I'm looking for wildlife, you're searching, you're looking, every now and again, my mantra changes. And I stop, I slow down, I sit down, and I let the wildlife come to me. And that's exactly what Scott Brown did up in Scunthorpe as well. And when he did it, look what turned up. A common shrew, one of our smallest but most active mammals. And as you heard the other day, in winter their brain shrinks, but this one, well, seems intelligent enough to me. He's digging around looking for grubs, looking for invertebrates, maybe small earthworms in there. And then eventually he disappears. Now I hope he didn't disappear up Scott's trouser leg. That's all I can say. Otherwise, Scott, you are in trouble, mate. They've got a nasty little bite in them, they have. And Meg, down in the New Forest, how is it with you? Is it dry?
It is dry. Honestly, it's unheard of, Iolo. It's been raining all the time so far, so it's the first dry night. There's still a while to go yet, though, so I don't want to jinx it. Now, beavers and shrews, now they are species that make you go, ah. But there are some animals that simply make you go, wow. And this is one of those. Steve Phillips is a camera operative, and he's been out in the Ardnamurchan on a peninsula in the western side of mainland Scotland. He took with him his hide, his camera, and a deer carcass, and he sat and he waited. Look at what happens next. The one and only, the golden eagle. What a remarkable bird it is. It's our second largest bird of prey that we've got in the UK, and it has a wingspan of over 2 meters. You can see its size there in comparison to the deer carcass. It is pretty large. And they're very territorial birds, particularly when there's nesting and feeding sites around. Just enjoy it. What a beauty it is. Listen to this. A contact call. A second individual comes in. This really caught everyone off guard, by surprise, massively. Now that individual that's come in there is much larger than the one on the left-hand side, and we can speculate that the larger individual is probably the female, and the one on the left-hand side is probably the male. Now the reaction there probably means that they know one another. They might be a bonded pair. And there's an estimate of about 440 breeding pairs in Scotland. What an amazing thing to go out and see golden eagles. I mean, does it get much better than that? Well, not really. It really doesn't. And in Springwatch 2016, we had the absolute pleasure of tagging a golden eagle. You might remember Freya, a very special bird. Now, there is a bit of an update on her. She's doing rather well. And if you'd like to find out more, then head to our website. Now, from one bird of prey to another, our red kites are relatively common in the south of England, but they haven't always been. So how did they get here from their last stronghold in Wales? Well, Iolo investigates.
I remember the first red kite I ever saw. I would have been, what, maybe 5 or 6 years old. I was walking along Quiet Country Lane with my mum near the village called Beulah. And my mum pointed up and said, see that big bird there? We're really lucky to see that, because that's a red kite. It's a really rare bird. It's in danger of dying out. And even though that was, what, more than 50 odd years ago now, that moment still stays with me clear as a bell. Cracking bird. Now, red kites are a national symbol of wildlife in Wales, but they were almost lost from the country forever. In Tudor times, they became a victim of the Vermin Act, and a price was put on their heads. By the 1890s, the persecution, the egg collecting, the taxidermy had got so bad that they were extinct in England, in Scotland and in Ireland, and just a handful of pairs survived in mid-Wales. But thanks to the conservation efforts of dedicated people, these birds have clawed their way back from the brink of extinction. I've travelled to Bwlch Nantararian feeding station for a reunion with one such person, an old friend of mine, Tony Cross. How are you, Tone?
Shemai, how are you?
Nice to see you, boy.
Yeah, and you?
Do you remember those early days, the early 80s? Because we spent a lot of time in the Cwm Ystwyth area, in the Elan Valley area, And of course the role then was to protect nests, wasn't it, from people coming to steal the eggs.
Yeah. So we all had CB radios, we were dashing around in second-hand crummy cars, chasing people, anybody that turned up who looked like they might want to rob a nest, which, to be fair, was quite a few people at the time. So we used to lose up to 25% of all the nests every year through robberies.
Tony and I first met at a red kite feeding station many years ago, sharing a passion for rescuing these remarkable raptors. In 1996, Tony was a founding member of a conservation organisation called the Welsh Kite Trust. For more than 2 decades, they've protected nests and raised awareness about these amazing aviators, with this year marking their 25th anniversary.
First year we started, we were monitoring, 125 odd nests. And then by the time we finished in 2012, it was over 600, 650, I think.
This centre is run by Natural Resources Wales and offers the red kites an additional helping hand with dinner. 10 kilograms of meat is prepared, which is enough to supplement their diet but not replace it. Since they began, they've seen the numbers grow from just a handful to a truly sensational spectacle. A very fitting place for our get-together. Here we go, Tone. Here we go.
Yeah.
I love it because once one starts going, all the others follow suit, don't they? It's like a blizzard of kites all of a sudden. Did you ever think, Tone, all those years ago, when you started working on kites in mid-Wales, that you'd be sat here watching, what, at least 200 kites up in the air?
No. When I started, we were trying to monitor every nest and ring every chick, and I think the first year I worked on it, we did 19 chicks. That was the whole productivity of the whole of Britain. So, the thought that you might have 200-300 in the air together at a time just, never occurred to us.
Oh, I know you'll never say this, Tom, but you played a pivotal role in red kite conservation. You must look upon something like this with a sense of pride, do you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, amazing. A sense of pride, I suppose a sense of just acceptance that it's like a job done. I think there are still areas that would benefit from having kites, but I don't think there's anything people need to do. I think it's just going to happen. The existing birds will spread, and it'll just become what it used to be in the past, which was probably the commonest bird of prey in Britain.
Tony Cross. Tell you what, he is a Welsh legend, he really is. And of course, the story of the kites doesn't end there. From 1989 onwards, they were reintroduced at several sites in England and Scotland, from Spain into England, from Sweden into Scotland, sorry. And since then, they've expanded rapidly and they've reclaimed a lot of their old ground that they used to occupy. And in Wales, the story doesn't end there either, because chicks were taken from Wales for a reintroduction scheme over in Ireland. Now, once again, Tony Cross was to the fore, as was the Welsh Kite Trust, the Irish Golden Eagle Trust and RSPB Northern Ireland. 160 chicks in all were taken from Wales over 4 years, released into aviaries initially, fed up till they were ready to go into the wild. And it's been a resounding success, with over 100 pairs breeding now. And there's one roost near a little village in Wicklow where they have more than 100 birds in it. Isn't that amazing? Fantastic success story, that of the red kites. Now let's bring things back nearer home now, across the Irish Sea into Wales, and let's go up to North Wales to a site called Traethlafan. It's an intertidal mix of sand and mud, 25 square kilometres in all, and in winter it's a real magnet for birds. In all, 15,000 birds gather here, attracted of course by the mild weather, but also by the rich food source. They do say that intertidal mud is some of the richest habitat on Earth. And these waders have different sized bills, so they probe different depths into the mud there, eating different prey and avoiding competition. But the most important bird, without doubt, is the oyster catcher. 6,000 of them there in winter. That's why it's a special protection area. And of course, when the tide comes, it pushes the birds up to a high tide roost. Look at that, a vision in black and white. And they're looking for safety. They're looking for somewhere. In this case, it's a small promontory where they feel safe. And they stay there until the tide recedes once more. Then they head back out to feed. It looks safe, but actually it isn't particularly safe. Disturbance is an issue, of course, but also peregrine falcons. There's a pair of peregrines nest not too far away, and they know that if they visit Traeth-Lavan, there's plenty of food down there, and the red shank is peregrine-sized prey. And this poor red shank has to ditch in the water to get away. And I've watched these birds hunt as a pair. The male will come in first, he'll scare the birds. Soon afterwards, the female will come in and she'll strike. They are amazing hunting machines. So the big question is, how on earth can those oyster catchers in that roost, how can they rest but then still remain vigilant? Well, scientists from Bangor University have looked into this, and the answer is peaking. Now let's have a closer look at those oyster catchers. Here they are in the roost, appear to be all asleep, but once we get closer in, watch the eye. See, one eye open, one eye shut. This is called peaking. It's an eye blinking strategy. They keep one eye open to remain vigilant, but they're still resting. And the amount of peaking scientists discovered, well, that varies according to the levels of disturbance. The more disturbance, the more that they peak, the more that they blink. And you see that if there is a threat, they're instantly alert. But they do peak less frequently when they're in large flocks. And this is called unihemispheric slow wave sleep. Unihemispheric slow wave sleep. That is a term Chris Packham loves. What does it mean? Come over here and I'll show you. We're looking down here at an opened head of an oyster catcher. So here we are, it's peaking. That eye is shut, that eye is open, and it'll blink and have a look every now and again. Now, while the right eye is open, the left side of the brain is active, but the right side of the brain is resting. And once they get tired, they'll swap that over again. Isn't that absolutely amazing? Now, it's not unique to oyster catchers. It's been recorded in several mammal species, and scientists have discovered something similar in human beings as well. You know, when you go to a new house, you're staying there overnight for the first time, you never get a good night's sleep, do you? You can hear every little creak, and that wakes you up. What's going on? Well, it's our left hemisphere that is always alert. So if there's a noise, it'll wake you up instantly. Science. Fascinating, fascinating stuff. And Chris and Meg, I tell you what, in the past I've been called a bird brain. I've had big burly guys come up to me and say, "You're a bird brain, aren't you, mate?" Well, from now on, I'm going to accept that as a compliment.
I think so, Iolo. I think that's a really big compliment. We need to change the definition of bird brain.
And
sure.
your left hemisphere hollow, Iolo, that's never asleep, I can tell you. Never
It's
asleep.
hollow too, I think, Chris.
So, of course, one of the animals that we always love to see, it always puts a smile on our faces, of course, the fox. What an amazing animal it is, absolutely iconic, and we can see it all over our countryside and our towns and cities. Have a look at this individual. Now, this was taken in Richmond Station in London. Clearly having a look at the social distancing signs there, ignoring it and carrying on forward anyway. But what a beautiful sight that is.
It is beautiful, but I'm slightly concerned about this because it's coming so close to the person with the camera that I think that this might be a fox that's been hand-fed. And whilst we do encourage people to look after their wildlife and feed their birds and other animals too, but it's always best to do it at distance so they don't associate you with food and then they don't come up to other people and sometimes, you know, upset them a little bit. So be careful if you're feeding your foxes. But it does give me an opportunity to get out one of my most pertinent treasures.
Any excuse.
Oh, look at this. This is a beauty. This is a fox skull that I picked up and cleaned up when I was about 10 years old. Look at that. Yeah.
It's in good nick, isn't it? It's still got all of its teeth and
All its
everything.
teeth. I know, I've cared for it, I've looked after it. It lives in a little box in the cupboard. You've never had your clammy hands on it.
I have.
I've kept... What? Anyway, the point is, in the last 50 years, our foxes' heads have changed shape because their skulls have changed shape. In June of last year, a number of scientists published some research that they'd done looking at the shapes of foxes' skulls. Now, they collected 111 skulls around London, 75 from the city itself, the rest from the surrounding countryside. And they chose landmarks, little spots on the skull, which correspond with very significant features on that skull. And they contrasted the shape of a rural fox's skull with that of an urban fox's skull. Now, these diagrams have enhanced the differences, but the differences are real. What are they? Well, look, the urban fox has a much shorter nose, but it's broader, whereas the rural fox has a longer and narrower nose. There's also another significant difference. Look at the back of the skull here, the brain case. Yes, the urban fox's skull seems to have shrunk. Now, that doesn't mean that it's got a smaller brain. It could be that the skull has changed shape to adapt to the musculature which is wrapped around that perhaps is being used to use its jaws or other aspects of that skull. The question is, of course, why have they changed the shapes of their heads in such a short period of time?
Well, it's a very good question, and we think it's actually all due to a change of diet. So our rural foxes with the longest snout ultimately are still trying to find live food. So this longer snout actually gives them a faster closing time. It enables them to better catch live prey. So they've remained in that kind of long shape and quite narrow as well, unlike that of our rural fox. But you can see it there, putting its jaws to good use and having a good sniff around. What a beautiful, beautiful animal. And of course, our urban foxes, they have changed their shape. So they are much narrower and much shorter. And that's because 60% of their diet actually comes from the things that humans leave around, anthropogenic food that we leave about. Have a little look at this. So this means that they've changed their diet, and to cope with the pressures of a different environment, they have essentially evolved to modify to best suit the area in which they live. And that, of course, is to make use of the food that's there, which is the food that we leave around. And you can see it there with packaging. And of course, that shorter snout might help them actually open packaging. So there's a lot of differences going on there. It's evolution in action, which I really love to see.
Evolution in action indeed. In fact, it's almost like a process of domestication, because the foxes in our cities are less fearful, they're less stressed by our appearance. And sometimes when things evolve and domesticate, it's not just about their physical appearance, it's about their behaviour as well. And they're showing something here which is called the domestication syndrome. There could be other changes taking place in the fox as well. And it's all down to its neural crest. It's a part of the animal's development at the embryonic stage, and hormones too. And what we could see in the future, as we've seen in some experiments with captive foxes, is that their tail gets shorter, their ears get floppier, their nose gets shorter, their teeth get smaller, and they end up wagging their tails. It could be happening sometime soon.
It could be evolution within our lifetime. It's amazing to think that we are literally witnessing this happen. And this fox actually is very, very interested and curious in our human environment. Obviously making the most of the snow there, quite interested by a snowman. Has a bit of a stretch, thinks, what on earth is this? Has a good look around. What a brilliant thing. Plays with the scarf.
Look at this. Look, 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 look.
And it takes the hat.
Yes.
Obviously a fashion-conscious fox we've got going on there.
Cap the whole thing off perfectly. Of course, they are curious animals. That's how they find their food. So that's why they do these sorts of naughty things, isn't it?
Yeah, being curious, having a look around. But Gillian, I mean, evolution in action within our lifetimes, that is so exciting, isn't it?
That is just absolutely fascinating. I can't believe that. Well, here in Cornwall, we have had a very rare bird make an appearance for the past few months. Now, this is a species that hasn't been seen on British soil since 2008. This is the sociable lapwing, and we can see it over here, filmed at Bude Marshes just a few weeks ago. Now, it's called sociable because it's normally found in large flocks, but this is one lone bird, and it's a rare bird for a number of reasons. There's only 52 recorded sightings since record keeping began in 1860, but it's also because this species is in sharp decline. It has been in decline since the 1930s. There's another reason, though, why it's rare in Britain. That's because it's a really long way from home. So let's take a look at where it's normally found. So this is its remaining stronghold here in Central Asia, in Kazakhstan. That's the summer breeding grounds, and it'll head down south to escape the winters down to past the Himalayas, the Arabian Peninsula, and over there, the Horn of Africa. So it is a very long way away from Cornwall, but let's take a look at what its natural habitat looks like. Now, these birds are found in the steppes, the grasslands there in Kazakhstan, and they historically would have been associated with the Saiga antelope. Very curious looking creatures. Now they would graze in large herds, keeping that grassland really, really short and making it ideal nesting habitat for the sociable lapwing. So the question remains is, how did that one lone lapwing find its way to Cornwall? Well, a 2011 scientific paper, suggested that it's possible that there is a regular number of birds overwintering in the Iberian Peninsula, so that's Spain and Portugal, and it's possible that that one bird made its way from the Iberian Peninsula. It hasn't been seen since the 4th of January, so it may have moved off the Bude marshes, very likely. There is good news, though, because it will hopefully find its way back to its breeding grounds as that migration urge kicks in with the prevailing westerlies. So that is amazing news for that particular bird. You can still see lapwings, though, our native species, in huge flocks. Now, take a listen to this. This is a very, very distinctive call. Some of you will recognize it. That is that peewit call. That also is another name given to lapwings, peewit. But take a look at this, because this will explain how it got the name lapwing. This is a name coming from the Old English, which means leap with a flicker, and you can absolutely see that there. Now, I know that they sometimes can appear as black and white birds, but they, in the right light, have this iridescent green and purple shimmer, distinctive head crest. If you listen carefully, there is that peewit call right there. Such amazing birds. Now, lapwings are in sharp decline in Britain, but you can still catch these amazing flocks, these winter spectacles, where they find refuge in places like, in reserves like Bude marshes. So tonight is Megan's last chance. This is her last shot on her mission to show some love for the creatures that many people love to hate. Now, one of the creatures she's on the slimy trail of is a much maligned mollusk, a creature that most of us know as the humble slug.
I'm on a bit of a stakeout, looking for an animal that comes out to play after dark. It has 27,000 teeth, munches all in its path, and it's a little bit slimy, leaving a trail of evidence for me to find.
With me on the hunt is naturalist Rosemary Winnell. She's a big fan of this little creature, and she knows this area better than anyone.
Oh, there's that lovely spider.
Because it's her back garden.
Ah, here we go. This is what it's all about. Slugs. So, what is the point of slugs?
Shall I have a look under here? Here's another refuge.
Any luck?
Yes, I think we've got something here. Yeah, I've just found the Budapest keel slug. Wonderful, wonderful Tandonia. Originally, they came from the Alps and the Balkans, but this one is one of the commonest ones you can find in a garden.
There's this common misconception, isn't there, that slugs are essentially snails, just without the shell.
Well, they've certainly evolved over many millions of years from snails, and they've retained their right hand asymmetry. So they've got one breathing hold on the right-hand side near their head, one genital pore on the right-hand side near their head, and believe it or not, they poo from a hole right up near their head, again on the right-hand side.
My favourite thing about slugs is the foot, which is the underside of the slug. And it's all about how it propels itself forward with kind of suction, isn't it, through this foot, which is an amazing piece of anatomy.
Yes, it's incredible to see it, but they will only move if they've got the right amount of moisture and in the right conditions, of course. And I think this one's about to move off my finger. We've got several here. So this is the netted field slug. They come in various colours. That one's quite a dark one.
I mean, slime is often what a lot of people don't like about slugs, but it's so important, isn't it?
The slime is used for protection, and amazingly, some of the proteins in that slime actually help the slugs to communicate.
So much information in slime.
Well, this one produces a very milky slime from its body, and that's one of the distinguishing identification features.
You know, I'd never think in a million years that you'd go about identifying slugs by their slime.
The keen slug recorder always carries a clean tissue in their pocket so they can stroke the slug to check the colour of the slime.
Brilliant. Learn something new every day.
I think they're the green-soled slugs. Oh, hang on, there's another one.
There's another
Oh,
one.
good gracious, this is Slug City.
Rosemary's love of slugs has taken her well beyond her back garden, and she has one final treat to show me. It's the largest slug, not only in the UK, but also in Europe, the ash black.
Oh, brilliant.
You know, I've never seen one of these, and I've always really wanted to.
Oh, that's fantastic. They can grow up to 30 centimetres.
30 centimetres, I mean, that is huge.
And you'd have to go to an old woodland to see them. These particular slugs, they go out to feed and then come back to the same little refuge under a log particularly, or in the base of a tree.
Yeah.
And so they learn their local environment in a rather special way.
Wow.
And probably in ways that we can't always understand.
We've got a lot left to learn about them then.
I think so, yes. In 1936, a Mr. Boycott said, "This slug is the noblest of slugs, with a wonderful judge of scenery."
Really?
And I love that. They are noble slugs, don't you agree?
Wow, very noble. Rosemary, why is it important that we love slugs?
So slugs are some of the best recyclers in nature. And of course, in our gardens, a lot of people hate slugs. But in fact, if we didn't have them, we'd have this accumulation of all this dead matter. Sometimes you can even find them on mammal droppings. They're actually recycling all those nutrients back into the soil, fertilising the soil, and without them, we'd be in a real pickle.
So slugs are essentially nature's own little gardeners.
They are. They really are doing a grand job, and we need to protect them and cherish them.
I like that. I like slugs.
That's two of us.
I'm glad to hear it. I hope there's many more of us.
Yes.
You know, when I was a kid, I would always be the one on the path on the way to school after it had been a wet night, picking up the slugs and the worms to make sure that they weren't damaged and putting them to the side. I'm not sure my teachers were very happy because I was always late to class.
Slug
but
rescue.
The slugs were safe, and that's the main thing.
I like slugs a lot. Have you ever seen leopard slugs mating?
Oh, I've seen a photo of
Eh?
it.
Leopard slugs mate by hanging on a string of mucus. They're hermaphrodites, so they're mating at the same time. They're hanging on a string of mucus from a tree. It is one of the most extraordinary performances. I suggest you Google it. Be careful what you type in. Leopard slugs mating. It's well worth watching. I
Not
can
in the
tell
UK,
you.
but they're still pretty
I tell you
remarkable.
what, shall we move swiftly on to our 9-way? Let's look at our live cameras now, and we can see what we've got there. Oh, not a lot happening in the New Forest. Maybe a bit of mouse activity maybe
Lots
there.
of
What about
waves.
starlings? Let's take a last look at our starlings under the pier. Oh, waves crashing in
wow.
tonight.
Look at that, the wind must be up. You can hear them as well.
And there they are. I like the starlings
Me
under the
too.
pier. It's been fantastic being able to watch them, hasn't it?
I've really enjoyed getting to know them under that pier and their movements as well, and of course that fantastic barn owl.
Oh, the barn owl's been great,
them.
hasn't it? We've been keeping an eye on our live cameras, of course. We put one of them down on the ground, loads of peanuts there to attract mice and voles, but we found a lot of blue tits found those nuts and came in and started to bicker about them. Look at this. Here they are, getting quite agitated with one another. But of course, in winter, when food is a limited resource, when you find a big pile of it, you want to look after it, keep it to yourself, don't you? And we've seen that with our missel thrushes. But look, just watch the posturing there. That's a classic threat display from both the great tit and here the blue tit. And if you see them doing this and you're close enough to it, they actually hiss at one another too. Fantastic. Something that you might see this weekend if you're taking part in the RSPB's Big Garden Birdwatch. Plenty of details about that on our website. Be sure to check it out.
They're not the only ones who have been a little bit active. They've also been scouting out interesting areas in preparation for spring. Have a little look at this. So this is a potential nesting site, of course. We here have got the blue tit coming in to check it out. Of course, at this time of year, they're not ready to start breeding yet, but they want to check their territories to know exactly where would be a good place to nest. They want to have a look at the nesting site. They'll have a look if there's good foraging opportunities nearby, because obviously they don't want to travel too far. The great tit comes in to have a look too. A little bit of competition there over that nest site.
It could be.
It could be a good one. It looks like a good one to me.
And holes are always a limited resource, which is why they take up residence in nest boxes so frequently.
Yeah, they do. And our pond camera as well has actually been quite interesting. We've got this earlier on. Have a listen.
It's great,
This
isn't it?
is a frog croaking. Look at that. Now, sometimes they have been waking up from hibernation quite early. It's been a bit wet. It's been quite a mild winter. So they have woken up a little bit. And I've seen reports on social media of frogs and toads coming out. And even some frog spawn has been out and about too, particularly in the southwest. It depends on region to region, but frog spawn is starting to be seen as well.
I like that. Do you know why I like that?
Go on.
Sign of spring, isn't it? Croaking frogs, sign of spring. Days are getting longer, won't be long now.
No, it really won't be long. Signs of spring. I mean, we're all looking forward to it, but we can't wish winter away. I mean, Gillian, what a fantastic thing that is. The frog croaking.
Yes, and we think we've also had signs of that down here at the Beaver Project. Now, we have been talking loads about the project here and the amazing work by Cornwall Wildlife Trust and the Beaver Trust, but there are many projects right around the country, all championing bringing beavers back to different parts of the country. Now, one of the newest projects is all about bringing beavers to a less rural habitat, a less rural setting than what we're in at the moment at Woodland Valley Farm. And just a few weeks ago, we joined the team that released the female beaver in a city. Plymouth is known as the UK's Ocean City, renowned for its maritime history, but it's also the site of the first urban beaver release project in Britain. Last November, a male was released to the enclosure, and today he'll be joined by a female, with the introduction being overseen by beaver ecologist Dr. Roisin Campbell-Palmer and Jerry Griffiths from the Plymouth Beaver Project.
City centres aren't normally the place you'd imagine a beaver to be released, but actually it presents lots of opportunities. People can come and learn more about beavers, why they're important, what they can do for the local environment and why they're so important to wildlife. Also how they can reduce flooding and improve water quality as well. So actually a beaver in an urban environment is a fantastic place to have one.
Roisin has travelled from Scotland with the female individual.
Currently in Scotland at the minute we are translocating some beavers from what we call conflict sites, and beavers have been living in Scotland for a minimum of 10-15 years now. As densities rise in certain areas such as prime agricultural land, there can be impacts that some people find negative.
In some circumstances in Scotland, licences have been granted to control populations of beavers in conflict areas, but projects such as this offer a different solution, as they are trapped and transported to new suitable habitats. And this female is about to be introduced to her new home.
it's fantastic. She's just been released, just waddled down into the pond. She's had a bit of a sniff around, nice little swim, so she's definitely looking happy, I think. We're waiting to see whether the male comes out of the lodge, and that'll be really interesting how they interact.
It doesn't take long for the male and female to get acquainted.
I'm hoping and envision that the beavers will form a pair, and if we're very lucky, we'll see offspring in the next few years.
And if they settle in anywhere as well as the beavers have down here, then it won't be long until there are little pockets of wilderness in the heart of the city. And Iolo, wouldn't that be the most amazing thing to see?
Yeah, absolutely, Gillian. It's fantastic news, fantastic news. At this point, I must apologise to the nation, beg your forgiveness, because yesterday we showed you some stunning footage of a snoring dormouse. It was fantastic, but I called it an edible dormouse. It wasn't, it was a common dormouse. They look nothing alike. Why did I call it that? Well, combination of old age, fading eyesight, lack of glasses, torrential rain, lockdown. I'm blaming all of those things. Sincere apology. Now, from one mammal to a flying mammal, and Wales is actually internationally important for its lesser horseshoe bats. We have a significant percentage of the European population here, so much so that many of the roosts are now monitored regularly, and one of them is here at the Centre for Alternative Technology, and local bat conservation officer Tony Hodges had a shock when he arrived here in December, because he saw this. Now, on the right here is a lesser horseshoe bat, and look at that big bat on the left. That is the much rarer greater horseshoe bat. It was a shock to him because it was the first one he'd seen here, and these bats, well, generally they hibernate in caves. The females hibernate singly usually, but the males will hibernate in small groups, like this group here. These are long-lived bats, and they hang upside down to conserve their energy, but they don't just lock down altogether. They will fly around. What they do is they shiver to warm up their muscles, and they venture out to feed, or sometimes if it gets too warm in there, they'll venture out to look for another roost. And that is exactly what we think has happened here, because when Tony came back, the greater horseshoe bat had moved on. Now, unfortunately, greater horseshoe bats used to be far more common in the UK than they are now. In the 20th century, we believe that we lost up to 90% of them. If we look at their distribution now, you'll find that it's very much geared towards the southwest. Places like Cornwall, Devon, South Wales, Pembrokeshire are real hotspots for them. So why the decline? Well, a combination of factors, really. Habitat loss was a big thing, the use of insecticides and pesticides as well. But the good news is that over the last 20 years, we've started to see an increase again. Why? Well, once again, it's a combination of factors. We know that the roosts, well, they are protected by law now. They also protect areas around the roosts, which are important feeding areas, of course. But it's more than that too. It's actually climate change as well. Now, we usually look upon climate change as being detrimental to our wildlife, but it's actually been beneficial to the greater horseshoe bats. We have warmer springs. That means that more insects are on the wing, and that means more food for the greater horseshoe bats. Now, that greater horseshoe bat now brings the number of bats recorded here at this site, I think it's to 6 now. And wouldn't it be fantastic if we came back in 5 years and they'd found a maternity roost here? Now, Chris Packham, he's a very lucky man, because before lockdown, he headed down to the fantastic RSPB Arn Reserve down in Dorset. And he was in search of one of our most spectacular, but one of our weirdest birds, the spoonbill.
It's a chilly winter's morning, and I've come just a few miles south of my home in the New Forest to the RSPB's Arn Reserve here, pretty close to Wareham. But I'm in pursuit of something very special, a very bizarre bird, a bird more imagined than real. Some white birds flying. Outstretched neck, black bills, black legs. Spoonbill. Look at that. An impressive flock of spoonbills overwinters here at Poole Harbour, and many of these birds make the trip from the Netherlands and Denmark to find our milder climate. They were a resident breeder in the UK up until the 17th century. But the one problem that they had is, like so many other species at that time, they were deemed to be tasty, and they became extinct as a breeding species in the UK. It wasn't until 2010 that they re-established a breeding colony in Norfolk. The fabulous spatulate bill is used for fishing, and they swipe it through the water, held just open. And any tiny organism which they sense within the bill, they then snap it quickly shut. And what are they after here? Well, they'll be after sticklebacks and crustaceans, but it's a very effective tool. What a sight, though. It's not failing to fire up my enthusiasm on a very cold winter's morning. Just look at that. I love a bird with an eccentric appendage.
You do?
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I love the avocet with its curved bill, spoonbill. Takes a biscuit. Well, takes a stickleback at least, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a very amazing bird, and I just so happen to have a 3D printed skull and bill in.
Massive envy over this.
I know you've already tried nicking it from me a few times. I've had to hide it away from you, like, let's keep an eye on you. But they've got amazing bills that allow them to feed effectively in the environment in which they do. They've got these sensory pits. They've got 20,000 sensory pits all the way around their bill, and in these pits are these pores, something called the Herbst, which is very sensitive, so they're able to go through the water and pick up all the individual invertebrate that they might sense there. So that's how they feed. But why are they shaped like that? That's the big question.
I feel better now. In 1994, science combined. Biologists and aerospace came together to try and figure out why the spoonbill's bill was spoon-shaped. And what they discovered was that the end of the bill here is like a hydrofoil. So if you measure the distance across the top, it's greater than the distance beneath that. And that means that when it's being swiped through the water, it generates low pressure on the top and high pressure underneath, which gives rise to tip vortices. Tip vortices. So imagine this bird is swiping it through the water. It's churning this up with all of these little spiral currents. What's the purpose of that? Well, those scientists thought that it would pull all of its prey off of the substrate up into the water column, therefore making it accessible for the spoonbill to eat. They even tested it with small hollow shells. But that's not the end of the story, is it?
It's not.
Take a look at this. Let's watch them in action.
So there's been a bit of an update on this story, and scientists in 2008 figured out that actually it might be to do with turbulence and drag. The shape of their bill might reduce that turbulence. And it's important, of course, for a spoonbill not to make its prey aware of its presence. So by reducing that drag, by reducing that turbulence, it's able to get itself in the right position so that it can get that prey effectively.
So the jury's out. We're still not entirely sure why the spoonbill's bill is this shape. So we better just move on.
Well, no, hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. A few years ago, I was chatting with a scientist who was working on spoonbills, and they asked me, what do you call a baby spoonbill?
Oh, I've heard this before.
You have heard this before. It is brilliant. You call it a teaspoon. Of course. What else would you call it? A teaspoon. I love it. How cute is that, baby teaspoon?
Moving very, very swiftly on to our final mindfulness moment of the series. We hope you've enjoyed all of these little opportunities to immerse yourself for 90 seconds into the quietude and simplicity of pure nature. And we're going to finish in the Cairngorms of Scotland, where James Stephens has given us this little portfolio of the simple beauty of nature. What about that?
Beautiful.
What a place, what a place. One last chance to take a look around our live cameras. Let's see what we've got at the moment. Oh, bottom left there, looks like a wood mouse. Yes, two.
Having a groom.
Mutually grooming mice.
Oh, look.
To end WinterWatch 2021? You know what I'm going to say.
Oh, no.
That's what you pay your licence fee for. Superb. But not only these mice, actually, because we've been watching our other mice over there in the Staddle barn. You remember the ones that did the train spotting skit the other day? Well, look at this. We tried to make their job a little bit more difficult. We put some water in the bottom of the U-bend and...
oh! It doesn't see it. Of course, it's pitch black in there and it falls into the water. This time it tries to drink its way out. A bit of a tall ask, if you ask me. It's a lot of water compared with mouse volume there.
Listen, we've got to show you the very best of all of our wildlife cameras, our live cameras, down here in the New Forest. Take a look at this. Fabulous stuff, but I'm afraid we have come to the end of our series. Before we go, though, I'd just like to tell you one thing. We're very proud to say that rather than use diesel generators, throughout many of our transmissions, we've been using green hydrogen and batteries, and we think that this is a world first. It's our way of addressing our carbon footprint, and we hope that we're rather leading the way in that regard.
Amazing. What an amazing series it's been. And one of my favourite things, of course, has been catching up with the winter watch list, all your photos that have been coming in. Have a look at this. This is one I saw earlier that I loved. This was John Clef, sent this beautiful photo of a brambling inn. What an amazing thing that is. But I'm not, of course, the only one who's been enjoying all of your photos and videos. Iolo Williams has too.
Yes, I have indeed, Meg, and I tell you what, I've enjoyed watching the otters up on the River Ness, the family up there, and a lot of you at home been seeing otters as well, sending in some stunning photographs, including this one. Look at this, sent in by Victoria Cooper. An otter enjoying itself on its back, sprays of water, and surrounded by those bubbles. And it shows you there's plenty around in winter. Gillian, what's caught your eye?
Oh, well, this is one of my favourite birds. This is what I call a splash of tropical colour in the winter. Take a look at this photo. This is absolutely spectacular. Goldfinches, and Andrew, you have caught every beautiful feature of these birds. The gold flash, that red marking on the face, the caramel breast is absolutely beautiful. And I would say, Chris and Megs, you know, this winter watch list has brought us so much joy, hasn't it?
It's been fantastic. My favourite photo is this one. Take a look at this. Remember the hair ice we had at the beginning? That curious phenomenon related to a fungus in the twig. Here, a coal tit, backlit, with bokeh, with hair ice in its bill. I rest my case. What an exquisite photograph. We hope you've enjoyed our series. We've done our very best to bring you the very best of British wildlife from all around the UK to put a smile on your face. So on behalf of the whole WinterWatch team, we'd like to say thank you for watching, and do, whatever happens, join us again for Springwatch when it comes up in just a few months' time. Until then, goodbye.
Bye.
Winter can be the harshest time of year. But with the storms and the cold comes a beauty, a charm that is shared by no other. When landscapes transform in savage splendour, and the skies themselves are full of rain, but also wonder.
Winter tides have brought welcome guests and unexpected treasures to our shores.
Whilst the winds carried migrants thousands of miles to reach safe harbour. And together, we've unlocked some of winter's secrets.
In our wildest of seasons, the wildlife can lead the way. Foxes must brave the elements or risk starvation, whilst badgers take every break in the weather to have some good, honest fun.
I have been amazed by the artistry of the beavers. Their creativity and industry combine to change the habitat. In a way, it doesn't just benefit them, but gives birth to new life hidden away.
Although many of us have remained tucked away in a hibernation of sorts, nature can inspire and delight even from a window. For me, fantastic flocks of starlings flying through the air are swirling symbols of a community working together. And what a spectacle they create.
Soon, the season will be changing. And the first signs of spring are already here, when you know where to look. Almost impossible flowers. Snowdrops with their tiny white petals emerging through frozen soil and snow, come wind and rain. Spring is tiptoeing towards us. Just look at these delicate little flowers, capable of withstanding all that the wild winter can throw at them, and blooming for the promise of a visit from a pollinator. And that won't be long now.